Welcome to Module 2 on personal branding. You will now be using the self-discovery exercises from Module 1 to create your branding tools and to learn how to effectively display your skills in a way that is appealing to potential future employers. As you watch the personal branding webinar, keep in mind that you want to send a consistent message across all of the documents, but that each should have a different tone and a unique feel. The 4 branding tools we're going to be discussing are your elevator pitch, or tell me about yourself statement, the resume, your LinkedIn profile, and your business card. There are obviously many others, but these are the 4 that are the most common that each of you will be using throughout your campaign. Start with the elevator pitch, or the tell me about yourself statement. Often, someone will say, ugh, whenever someone says tell me about yourself, or whenever you hear the term elevator pitch, kind of put some butterflies in your stomach because you don't know what to say. You don't know what an employer might be wanting you to say. I'm going to show you a couple of examples here. The first is a more traditional example. I'm a serial entrepreneur that started a company exporting U.S.-made pet food to Japan after college. I graduated in the top 5% of my class at Harvard Business School and was then the lead corporate development guy on the sale of hot jobs to Yahoo in 2002 for $436 million. I founded theladders.com 7 years ago to focus on bringing high-level talent together with 100K plus jobs, and the company has grown to be an international success with over 300 employees. In this example, the speaker or the writer comes across as very polished, very accomplished, and that's a good thing. But it's not the only thing, especially if you're looking here in Austin, Texas. In Austin, we're about connecting with people, and although this particular elevator pitch would be great for an interview situation, it might not be something that would open up a conversation during networking. In the networking perspective, you might want to start with something more like this. My passion in life is jobs. I love everything about them. It combines the soft stuff, people's dreams and hopes and ambitions, with the hard stuff, where the jobs are in the economy, the numbers and algorithms and technology that make it possible. I've been doing this for over a decade, and I find that I'm learning something new about making job hunts successful every day. Helping people through what is one of the most stressful experiences in their lives is tremendously rewarding and fulfilling, and I love doing it. You may or may not have noticed that these quotes are both from the same person, Mark Cinnadella of Ladders.com. If you hadn't known that, however, it might be hard to imagine that these were from the same person, because the first one was very accomplishments-oriented. I've heard people say it sounds arrogant. This one's different, though. It's a different tone. In comparing the two, that first one was very achievement-focused. It was professional. It doesn't pass the backyard bud test. Well, what's wrong with achievements, Courtney? We just went through the part in the self-discovery webinar talking about the importance of talking about your accomplishments. Well, there's nothing wrong with achievements, but you want to make sure to use those in the right setting. The second one would be in a better case of networking. It's motivation-focused, it's future-focused, it's conversational. More importantly, it is other-focused. I hate to break it to you, but your career campaign isn't really about you. It's about the company, or it's about the person who you might be networking with who could help. The more you can make it about them rather than about you, the more it then becomes you by default. So you really want to focus your opening messages on the other person. How can you help? What is it about your background that can help them? Rather than, here's what I've done, I'm great, hire me. Please stop the recording at this time and complete the elevator pitch assignments. There are several of those in the packet that also involve you watching a couple of YouTube videos that have different takes on elevator pitches or tell me about yourself statements. The next aspect of your personal brand is your resume. Have you ever thought that resumes are no longer relevant or that they should be colorful and eye-catching? One resume should cover me since I'm looking for the same type of position. I haven't updated my resume in years. Resumes are different in 2018 than they were 5 years ago or 10 years ago. You're looking to grab someone's attention. And sometimes it's easier just to create one resume that you send for every situation. But the problem is one resume doesn't fit every situation. And so we have to put these things together in a way that make you stand out, that are easily tailorable for various situations, and that you're comfortable sitting in front of an employer in the future and being able to discuss. So let's think about what's really important. Resumes tell you three things: what you've done, where you've done it, and when you've done it. The only part of that that's important is what you've done. But unfortunately, the formatting of many resumes emphasizes where or when, and sometimes the when you're not currently working, is the most damaging part of a resume because it shows gaps and other parts of your experience that you may not want to highlight. So how do we format a resume in a way that really focuses on what you've done? First of all, you want to make it a story. The most challenging part of writing a good resume is making it tell an interesting story. And that's all you're doing, is telling your professional story in the format of a resume. It can take as little as 30 seconds for an employer to decide if a resume deserves consideration. So you want to make sure that your resume is set up in a way that someone can immediately glance at it to determine how much time they want to take in looking into that resume or potentially bringing you in for an interview. So let's talk about the different components of the resume. We will be going through each of these as we go through the remainder of the webinar. So you need to have name and contact. Name and contact information should go at the top half of page 1. I know that sounds like it should be intuitive, but there are some interesting things that happen in the world of applicant tracking systems. The format that you see on the slide in front of you is the format that you want to have. You want the first thing on that resume to be your name. Some people like to put their address and their contact information in the left-hand corner and then their name in pretty font in the upper right-hand corner. Well, the problem is the applicant tracking systems name you whatever the first thing is on the resume. So if Austin, Texas is the first thing on a resume, that's what it's going to name you. Also notice that there is no actual physical address here. We don't use physical addresses on resumes anymore as they can be discriminatory. A certain zip code can tell people where you live and what your demographic, what your neighborhood looks like. Additionally, we in Austin have become very sensitive to commute time. And if you live in Hutto or you live in Buda or you live in Kyle and it says that on your resume, many companies across Austin won't even look at you because they're afraid that you're going to get tired of the commute. So we just keep it to Austin, Texas. Notice that your email address is there up top. If you still have a Yahoo or an AOL account that you're using as your main email address, please change it to a Gmail account or something that's a little bit more modern. Lastly, you want to have your customized LinkedIn URL on there, and we will talk more about that when we talk about social media profiles. But these are the things that should go on the top line of your resume. Next, we move into titles and professional summary. Many of you may be from the day of remembering when there used to be an objective on resumes. We no longer use objectives anymore. Notice it just says healthcare executive right there on the top. That's all you put. The top of the resume should have titles that you were pursuing. If the resume is being sent for a posted position, it will have the actual title of the job in the job rec. Then you want a professional summary that gives general statements about your professional experience. You want to be able to clearly and simply articulate your skills and competencies. Sometimes we get very wordy. Experience in management of facilities, doing all kinds of things in this big long laundry list, as opposed to simply saying facilities management. As you see here, you want to use short words and phrases that can be easily seen and grasped by whoever's reading this, whether the set of eyes reading it belong to a human or belong to a computer. You want to focus on your skill sets. In module number 1, I had you identify your top 15 functional skills. These skills will be at the top of your resume, but you will change them in and out depending on the specific job. You will be tailoring that skill set based on your audience. If you're not quite sure what some of those skills may be or what other words you might use, You can look at other people's profiles. You can use the job description itself to pull out those keywords. Or you can go into the endorsement section of LinkedIn and put in a word, like on this example you see real estate. You put in real estate and it gives you a whole bunch of suggestions that maybe are more specific types of real estate or more specific to what you've done in real estate. You want to be able, again, to very clearly articulate your skill set, and it will be right smack dab at the top of your resume. It'll be tailored every time you send it. You want to then tell your professional story through specific accomplishments. These are the accomplishments that you were writing in module number 1. What you see here is the example, if you'll remember, of when I said you want to give specific examples rather than just a blanket statement. Under Not This, the ability to close multi-million-dollar deals, that's your blanket statement. Instead, you want it to read like the one above. Negotiated and closed $4 million deal with Fortune 500 software company, the largest single sale in company history to date. You can see the difference between being able to give a specific example with a result as opposed to just giving an ability statement. You want to start each statement with a past tense action verb rather than saying responsible for. The only exception is if you are currently working, then you will start your current job description with a present tense verb. But everything else is something that happened in the past. Since we are defining accomplishment as something that is a unique situation with a beginning and an end, any of your accomplishments have also ended, so they will be starting in past tense as well. Your education goes at the end of the resume unless it's something that has been received in the previous 3 years. By the time you have worked, you're going to be relying on your experiential knowledge rather than on your academic knowledge. So we downplay the dates of your education because those can actually aid you. If you have gotten your education, if you've gotten a degree or a certification recently, then you might want to add the date on it just to show that it is current knowledge and that you are ahead of the game in terms of keeping up with new things. We do not put a GPA on an education unless you are a new college graduate. Now that you've determined what the content looks like, you've got to choose formatting again to emphasize what you've done rather than where you've done it or when you've done it. Product placement on a resume is just as important as product placement on the kiosk at the end of the aisle at Target. You want to think about reading above the fold. You want to have the meat of your resume on the top half of page 1. There are often questions about how long a resume should be. Well, if you don't have their attention on the top half of page 1, it doesn't matter whether that resume is 1 page long or 39 pages long. They're not going to go any further. You also want to think about what we call the golden triangle. Our eyes are automatically drawn to things that are along a left-hand margin or across the top of a page or across the top of a table. This is also why we don't want to use the words responsible for, because if everything says responsible for, responsible for, responsible for down the left-hand margin, then they don't see the meat of the action of what you've done. So rather than responsible for, you want managed, directed, innovated, those very strong action words. You also want to have a lot of white space on the page. Having words that are too close together or font that is too small can be overwhelming to a reader. It's better to go ahead and go to 2 or 3 pages than it is to try to shove everything onto 1 page that's very hard to read. You want to make it as easy as possible on an employer to see your information. You'll want to place your name by itself on the top line. In the first example, you see that the name is the first thing on the page. Some people like to give the resume some pizzazz by putting the address and the contact information on the right and then their name. Unfortunately, though, applicant tracking systems then name you whatever the first thing is that it says on the page. So this person will be named 1, 2, 3, 4 career path. You want to make sure that your name is the first thing that appears on the resume. This is an example of what the top of a resume might look like. You notice the contact information, then on the top line, titles that would be pursuing, professional summary, the 15 functional skills that will, of course, be tailored for various positions, and then a career highlights section where you're pulling up your top 3 accomplishments and putting them right above the fold so that just in this part of the resume, an employer can see very clearly the value that you bring. The rest of the resume then is just the details about employment and such. With dates, as I mentioned before, the dates of employment are sometimes the most damaging parts of the resume for people who are not currently working or who have a lot of gaps. You'll notice at the top that the date is in parentheses right next to the city. You do not want the date to be standing by itself in a bunch of white space, either to the left or to the right margin, because then it draws attention to those dates. The dates are there, but you want them to be just additional information, not something that is drawing attention. You want to try to limit your resume to 2 pages if possible, but it's more important to tell your story. Just make sure that whatever's on the resume is directly applicable to whoever the particular audience for that resume is. Limit statements to 2 to 3 lines maximum. Keep it simple. Include only 3 to 5 bullets per subsection. You don't need 20 bullets. When everything is bulleted, nothing stands out, and you want people to be able to see the most important information, not have that most important information be buried in between a lot of fluff. You also want to use bold font and italics sparingly to preserve the impact. When everything is bold or italicized, again, nothing stands out. And you want to use an easily legible font, something that is sans serif font, like Calibri or Verdana. You don't want to use fonts like Times New Roman that are pretty but that get very hard to read when they're small or when there's a lot of text on the page. The first type of resume I'd like to show you is one that we call a hybrid or a combination resume. This is a resume that is achievement-oriented, but basically is in the order of the old school. So, I showed you this a moment ago as the top half of a hybrid resume. This is what page 2 of a hybrid or combination resume might look like. You'll notice that the paragraph under the job title is basically a description of job responsibilities. On an old resume, this might have followed the words responsibilities included. The bullet points then are reserved for accomplishments. That's where you want your focus. So keep the job responsibilities just buried in a little paragraph, and then let your bullet points be your accomplishments. Down at the bottom, then, you see the education. If you have certifications, this would also be added to that section. Another type of resume is a functional resume, and this has a little bit different purpose. Most people who use functional resumes use them because maybe there's a big gap in their employment, or maybe they are going through a career change. A functional resume focuses almost solely on the first page for what you've done. And then where you've done it and your professional history is almost an afterthought on this type of resume. The top half looks much like the hybrid or combination, but you'll notice that rather than career highlights and having just 3 there, you start running a whole list of your selected accomplishments. These can be categorized by the skill that you're trying to emphasize with each one. As we roll into page 2 of a functional resume, you'll see that those bullet points continue. When we get to the professional experience section, it's a very simple company title and 1 line about what your job responsibilities were there, and that's it. Because you want the focus to be on what you did, on those skills, and how your accomplishments are directly related to those skills, rather than the more chronological representation in the hybrid or combination resume. Which should you use? It depends on your circumstances. The hybrid is going to be one that most employers are going to be a little bit more familiar with. It's still different from the chronological, and so will get attention, but it's not as radically different as a functional resume. So you'll just have to make that decision. If you are in true career change, you might want to go with the functional. There are resume mistakes that we see all the time, the most important being when you only have one and you're not customizing it for specific positions or situations. You want to watch for grammar or spelling errors. Some people may not even notice, but for the ones who do, it can be a big problem. You don't want to be eliminated from a position that has absolutely nothing to do with grammar or spelling because of a spelling error in a resume. You want to emphasize your accomplishments, and you don't want to give equal weight to your accomplishments as you do with minor responsibilities. You want to make sure that your formatting is consistent. It's being detail-oriented. Just glance at the resume. Does it look right to you? Does it look like it's put together, or does it look sloppy? You want to make sure to have just enough information. Too much information can actually be more detrimental than not having enough, because with too much, people aren't going to read it, or maybe you've told so much of the story that the employer automatically knows they don't need anyone with your current skill set. You want to make sure the resume is focused, and it wants to be focused on where you're going, not on where you've been. And you want to make sure to have a professional email address. If you went to college someplace and your email address still has your mascot in it, it's time to remove that and move into a more professional email address. We hear all the time about applicant tracking systems. When we get to Module 3 and we start talking about career transition process, we will be talking about ways to circumvent these systems, but they are still a fact of the job search process. The more simple the formatting you can have on a resume, the better. The applicant tracking system is looking for normal sections in normal order. This is not the time to be creative with moving things around. The best bet is a Word doc, and this is .doc, not docx, or rich text format. Some of the applicant tracking systems are still confused by PDFs. You want to use as many keywords as you can directly from the job description, because the applicant tracking system may or may not understand synonyms. It needs to see the exact words. You want to spell out the word the first time that you use it, whatever it may be. Then in parentheses, put the acronym or the abbreviation, and you can then use that abbreviation through the rest of the document. And as we mentioned earlier, you want to avoid spelling errors. Some applicant tracking systems will automatically kick out documents that have too many spelling errors because it can't read them and it figures it doesn't know what it's looking at. Familiarize yourself with this website. It's JobScan, jobscan.co, not .com. This is a real interesting place to see what applicant tracking systems see when they see your resume. You paste your resume onto one side and the job description on the other, and then do a scan. And JobScan will then give you an idea of what keywords are in the job description and how many times they're there, as well as if those keywords appear in your resume and how many times. And it can give you an idea of what type of tailoring needs to be done for your resume to more closely match the job description. Familiarize yourself with that site. It's a nifty tool. Once you've used it 2 or 3 times, you probably won't have to use it again because you've gotten used to it. But you want to be able to match about 70 to 75% of the job description in order to better your chances that your information will get through the applicant tracking system. At this time, please stop and look at the resume assignments in the module packet, and then see you on the other side. The next branding tool after the resume is your LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn is one of the primary ways right now that employers are finding candidates, and so you want to make sure that your profile is optimized in a way to make it most accessible to the LinkedIn algorithm and the LinkedIn searches. The first thing you need to do is set up a couple of things on LinkedIn. You want to customize your LinkedIn URL. To do this, view your profile, then look for the section that says Edit Public Profile. In there, you will open it, and if you see a bunch of numbers, then you have not yet customized your LinkedIn URL. Change that to something that is identifiable as you, just like you would set up a Gmail account or something like that. This LinkedIn URL is what will go at the top of your resume in lieu of an address. You also want to set certain privacy controls. The 3 that we want to look at are the 3 that you see on the slide. Under Profile Viewing Options, you want to make sure that is in private mode. Don't worry, this doesn't mean that people can't see you when they're searching. It just means that when you're looking at other people, they are not going to see that you have looked at their profile 14 times in 2 days and wonder what's going on. We might open that up later, but as you really get started in this process and you're looking at a lot of people, you want to be doing that in private mode. Secondly, you want to manage your active status so that people do not see that when you're on LinkedIn. Lastly, you want to make sure that sharing profile edits is set to no. That way, as you're doing a lot of changes to LinkedIn over the next few days or few weeks, you're not going to be notifying your entire network every time you make a change. The slide you see in front of you lists the steps in the LinkedIn algorithm. When someone is searching for candidates or doing searches on LinkedIn, this is the order in which LinkedIn searches. first, you need to have a complete profile. You will know if you have a complete profile if you look at your own profile and it says All-Star. If someone is doing a search for candidates who have similar backgrounds to yours, and 200 people in LinkedIn fit that background, 180 of them have complete profiles and you don't, the highest you can appear on those searches will be number 181. So you want to make sure that your profile is complete, and we'll talk in just a minute about what that looks like. The next part of your profile that the LinkedIn algorithm searches are your endorsements or skills. Next, the headline and your summary. You want to have a whole lot of details. Unlike a resume that just sticks to the basics about your professional experience, you don't know what aspect of your profile someone will find intriguing or connection-worthy. Your LinkedIn profile should be very robust and should include a lot of things that you would not normally include on a professional resume. These are the components of a LinkedIn complete profile. We will be going through each of these over the next few minutes. The first component is industry and location. To set this, you will go to My Profile and click on the pencil. You will then choose an appropriate industry from the drop-down menu. LinkedIn will only allow you to have one industry in the top part of the profile, but LinkedIn counts industry as a skill. So you can also go into the skills and endorsement section of your LinkedIn profile and add a skill, and you can put in an industry there. In addition, you want to have a location. As we discussed with the resume, this location should be Austin, Texas. You don't want to put Hutto or Kyle or one of those cities that's going to scare employers away in fear that you're not going to want to be commuting. So you want to set up your industry and location. Next, you need to have an up-to-date current job with job description. This is often where people discover they don't have a complete profile. If it says expert or intermediate, it's usually because you are not currently working and you did what you should have done, which is go in and close out that position in LinkedIn. To solve that problem, you're going to create a new current position. In the title line, you'll put 2 or 3 titles that you're pursuing, and in the company line, you put open to new opportunities or available for new opportunities. I like that verbiage rather than seeking, because seeking new opportunities may suggest desperation. Open to or available for suggests, hey, you lucky employer, you came across my profile just at a time that I happen to be open. So you'll want to make sure that you have something down as a current job. Next, you look at your skills and endorsements. In the skills and endorsements section, LinkedIn allows 50 skills. Keep it around 40 so you can add new skills as necessary. As we look back over the last few years, there are some skills that didn't even exist 5 years ago or that weren't called such, things like customer success, cloud computing. So you want to be able to add new skills as necessary. Once a skill has a number next to it, don't mess with it, because you're going to risk deleting all of the endorsements that went with it. If you get up to 50 skills and you need to open one up, look for those skills that you're not as concerned about. Like in mine, I've got a bunch of endorsements for time management. That's not a skill that I'm overly concerned about having to sell if I ever get back out in the job market again. So I might switch that one out for something else. You need to have at least 50 connections. Based on the idea of 6 degrees of separation, the more first-degree connections you have, the more second-degree connections you have, and the better chance you'll have a contact or introduction into a specific company. When you come to the office for the career transition workshop, I'll show you how to build those connections if you don't already have them. You also want to have a profile photo. Now notice the asterisks here. The profile photo is not actually part of the complete profile, but the profile photo is very important. There was research done across the country where people sat in front of their computers and were told to look through LinkedIn profiles, and there was some mechanism on the computer that tracked eye movement. Over 30% of the time, eyes were on the profile photos alone. What you see in the picture on this slide is an example of one of my former clients off of a website called photofeeler.com. Photofeeler allows you to upload a picture, and then get some feedback on, do you look competent? Do you look likable? Do you look influential? You have the opportunity to critique other people's photos as well, and the more people you critique, the more people get to critique yours. I've had some people in the past who have changed their photos based on feedback that they have gotten. Now, you're not going to please everyone, but it makes sense to get some feedback on what the first impressions are of you just based on your photo. When Photo Feeler sends your photo out for critique, there is no identifying information, just the actual photo. Recommendations also has asterisks by it because this is not part of the LinkedIn Complete profile, but there are certain subscriptions that allow users of LinkedIn to only search for people who have recommendations. So you want to request 3 to 5 recommendations from people who can speak to your professional abilities. They could have been supervisors, vendors, suppliers, peers. They need to be with your most recent positions. You don't need 20 of them, but 3 to 5 solid recommendations. After the complete profile, the headline is the next part of the LinkedIn algorithm. You want your headline to be compelling. You want it to use keywords. You get 120 characters in your LinkedIn headline. Use them all. You do not want it to be your job title. If you have not purposefully created a headline, LinkedIn has created one for you using your most recent title and company. The first sample you see on here is mine, helping people reach career goals intentionally, exploration, resumes, interviewing, negotiation, social media, and networking. Nowhere on there does it give my actual job title. Because the headline is at the very top of your LinkedIn profile, just like we talk about the top half of the first page of the resume, you want people to still see skills and you want them to focus on what you do rather than on a job title. After the headline is your professional summary. On a resume, this summary is going to be 3 to 4 lines, very dry, dull resume language because that's the way it is. Your LinkedIn summary, however, is for social media. It should be social. Do not leave it blank. You want to use all 2,000 characters. Consider your audience. This is a place to tell your professional story using keywords. How'd you get here? What have you accomplished? What makes you different? Down there at the bottom, think authentic, genuine, and believable. During one of the earlier modules, I had you watch Simon Sinek's TED Talk on What's Your Why. This is a great place to use that, talking about why you do what you do. So you're telling the same story as your resume, but you're telling it from a different perspective. Use all 2,000 characters. This is my professional summary, or part of it. You'll notice that the last sentence in the first paragraph says, career transition can be a stressful time. I strive to lighten the load a little, providing advice and direction, of course, but more importantly, giving a laugh, a hug, or a kick in the pants when warranted. From what you already know about me, you can probably say, yep, that's her. I would never put anything about laughing, hugging, or kicking anybody in the pants on my resume, but in LinkedIn, it's okay. You want your summary to be something that you can show to a close friend and say, what do you think? And they ought to be able to see you and hear you in that summary. The next step is to make the profile as robust as possible. You will see a part when you open your profile up at the top under where you did the URL to add a profile section. This is where you can add in groups, where you can add in interests. You can add all kinds of things in here. One thing that you do not put in LinkedIn is your actual resume. You allow the profile itself to stand as your resume information. You want to update your profile regularly. What I mean by this is like 3, share 2, and post 1 each week. Through the course of your campaign, you're going to be reaching out to people proactively, but there's no way for you to reach out to everyone on the planet. You want people to be being drawn to you. So each week you want to follow people and like things that are being said, share things that are being said. The shares are where you can really get a lot of traction because when you share something, everyone in your network sees that you've shared it, and everyone in the network of the original poster sees that you've shared it. You also want to post something each week. It doesn't have to be something that you have written or that you have created, but maybe it's an article that you read or a video that you've seen that you want to share to the group. Please, please, please watch or read every word from beginning to end before you like, share, or post anything, because you don't want to run into a problem where it sounds great at first and then gets a little wonky at the end and it's not something that you necessarily want your name to be associated with. But this is the best way to get people to start focusing on you. When you do post something or share it, don't comment on it. Ask a question about it. Get other people talking under your post, and that way you've got a lot of conversation happening on something that you started, and hopefully someone will reach out to you. The last branding tool is your business card. Now, some people think that business cards are obsolete, but I always suggest you err on the side of what is positive or neutral rather than something that could hurt you. If you hand a business card to somebody and they don't want it, no big deal. However, if they ask you for one and you don't have one, that's a problem. What goes on them? Name and contact information, phone number, email address, and that customized LinkedIn URL that we just changed when you were doing your LinkedIn profile. White space, where you or others can jot down a few notes. You're not going to be putting a title on these because titles are pigeonholing. So you want to make sure that there's a place where somebody can write down where they met you or something like that. Finally, you might want to include a marketing statement. This might be the What's Your Why statement that came off of Simon Sinek's TED Talk. Maybe even a QR code connecting to your customized LinkedIn URL so that someone can scan it. You can simply go to Google and type in free QR code, and then you can link that QR code to your LinkedIn URL. If you are an iPhone user, there's also an app called BizCard, B-I-Z-Z card, that you might want to look into, that makes it real easy for you to populate other people's address books with your business card information. If you haven't already done so, please schedule a meeting with your advisor at this time to go over the first 2 modules. So now